going on, guys? So for my second vlog post, I will be talking about gender roles and, in particular, masculinity in skateboarding and in how to change the roles of masculinity in larger, I guess, social roles. Um, and I picked the skateboarding is like dancing, masculinity as a performative visual culture in art education article by Annika Emil Hellman from the University of Gothenburg, Sweden. In particular, because the sort of the summary in the abstract of the research that they did, which was looking at how skateboarders were using masculinity to before sort of or not before but as how skateboarding used masculinity to try and include groups of people, and this particular researcher looked into whether it was actually effective as a tool in the classrooms to teach about masculinity, and they came up with interesting conclusion that I'm not so sure I really agree with per se, but I think they raised a lot of really good points about masculinity, and versus what they refer to as hegemonic masculinity. And of course, we talked about hegemony, so this caught my attention. And how hegemonic masculinity sort of strives to be exclusive, whereas they were aiming to teach and influence young males to adopt inclusive masculinity. Now, that being said, the part of our textbook that really caught my eye, that connected this all for me, is the chapter about, or chapter 2, in the section about value collecting and institutional critique. And what's very, very interesting to me, and I sort of have this view, or it's my view, that when someone or a group of people want to make a social change in a capitalistic, and I think it doesn't even have to be capitalistic, but in a society at all, it really doesn't matter about the economics behind it, but they need to show the culture, and when I say the culture, I mean the population, the overall population, the value in that change, because otherwise it just doesn't happen. With large groups of people, we're talking about populations of countries or cultures, major cultures, not just subcultures, but major cultures. Changes need to come with value. And the weird thing about social changes is they don't always come with inherent or sometimes obvious values. And so when it comes to making changes, it's up to the people who want those changes in place to practice and exemplify the value that these changes come with. And they bring that up in the article that I mentioned earlier in the reading, and how a lot of the value that these skate groups bring, particularly the inclusive masculine images that skateboarding comes with, that in itself is the value that I think is what made countercultural skating groups, or that skate culture back in the 90s, and now this article was telling us that in Sweden it was becoming much larger there, that creating that inclusive sort of subculture is the value, and that happens a lot. It's how subcultures really begin, I believe, is that you create this island where people who don't feel like they are included in the overall culture, that value of belonging is intrinsic to them, and so they do go there. But when it comes to making large changes, when we're talking about hegemonic masculinity on overall scales, like global scales, or let's just talk about national scales, you have to talk about the culture, or the value that can come along with that. And I do believe that there is value in that. And I do think that hegemonic masculinity can be, well, I don't want to use the word toxic, but sure, it can be. And exclusivity may have value in it, but I think we're living in a world where that just isn't the case anymore, nor should it be. And I think to move forward and to be progressive, not just for the sake of progress, but for just better progress, including more people into the masculine sort of dogma is the key. I think the goal, and this I guess is really in my opinion now, is if you were going to redefine masculinity, what you would want to do, and I do think it's happening actually, and I would give more examples, but I don't want to go for too long. But I think if you wanted to change masculinity in the overall aspect, take it from like that alpha male, like, you know, big dog eating all, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, the bully sort of aspect. You take that, you want to get rid of that, then you have to show that it's the inclusive masculine, men or women, who achieve success, and that can be done total, a bunch of ways. But I do believe visual culture will play a huge role in that, as time goes on. And like I said, I do believe there are celebrities, I think there are movies, that are going about including men who are inclusive as successful, valuable members of society. I mean, I'll tie this back to Black Panther because that was, something we've been studying in class. T'Challa, everyone around him, like if you want to talk about his political cabinet, basically everyone around him, all of his advisors were women, and so that, like, here's a key, like, visual culture icon at the moment who is being inclusive of other people around him. So that was just one example. But if you want more, ask me in class, or love to have a conversation about this. But to round it all up, the skateboarding article brought up the idea of inclusive masculinity, and although the article said that skateboarding has its problems, for a few reasons, I do believe what skateboarding did was create value to this subculture, and that just exemplifies my point that creating value to something that you want in place is the key factor that needs to be done or achieved in order to create a huge social change in the overall culture, of a country or the world. So I guess if you want to make a change, think about how that change will add value to everybody's life, not just the subcultures, but to the entire culture's life. But yeah, so thanks, I guess.